You write your own chapter question? Because that doesn't
But I probably did it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was.
Serious.
I booked him for one.
No, mine doesn't even have any.
There was a couple other problems. I think one of them, it was like very, it's like you got it right, but it just what the computer was looking for.
yes and no. I mean, you have to guess. If you think about it, it's just like not like coding.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was a while, so. I was up to 5.7. Yeah. So 5.4 and 5.7 were the only two. Yeah. Okay. Then I understand.
Did people?
5.4 we did.
Yeah.
So we did it once, but I had moved to
Let's see what we got here.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh. Okay. Oh, it's over here. Oh, yeah, sorry. Chrome. So.
Yeah.
Digital literacy technology.
I'll turn it back on.
Yeah.
Close it and
Yeah, I think 20 times.
Freaking, so that crash right now, there was one of the things was just like, how would you troubleshoot your coworker's computer or something like that? And I'm like, well, they're giving me, telling me that, like, I actually doing it, so I literally.
Okay, look, the Bible learning. So I did
Just be the same.
well, when I last time to actually go and pull it out from like chapter 4, just put it in our Colab here. So you guys.
Yeah, that's what they did.
That's what I want to first. I'm gonna have to go to like EM6.
I'll pull it out.
Yeah.
That was really
That
cool.
was just
I was like, oh, holy God.
Not till yesterday, yeah, those meetings. Yeah, that was part of the-
I went on vacation.
Internet like really far out. That's what happened to me. Every time I change.
It doesn't matter. The info is there.
They can't give you, because these, you can get this, the guy out there in like 3 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
I didn't.
I just
think I was
use
moving. I used until like completely
Yeah.
in until 20.
Well,
Yesterday, I don't use, but then
I just,
my
I went.
I got cancer. You want to match it?
Okay, not as long.
So I moved it to that.
So if I screenshot.
Oh my
I was
or whatever, it's just like.
Oh, yeah, no.
No, if I print screen, drop it. It shows, it's all very long, it prints all. That's right. I drive my.
I was gonna say, but I'm going to.
Yeah.
But now that me.
Yeah, I just.
But then, sometimes it's really nice little reference, the whole chapter. So yours is nice to have. I just always need that. So that's whatever you find it.
Yeah, I mean, all of those, all of them.
One thing I remember,
I think on
last CIS everything's online on my mind, so I keep that. You know what I mean? So it's good to have it all on one thing.
Okay, I'm counting. Zach Drake, Jessica Webb, Alexander Beatty, and Valisa Wilson absent. If any of you are here somewhere, let me know. quite a few absent people. These are your group mates. Gonna bring you down. Here's that.
Are you talking about this one?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can just do it. So, yeah, is it like a promotion? So,
Okay.
When I got some money before.
and then I forgot that it's.
Oh, I still have.
You know, yeah, I did it once.
Well, it works, it counts, right?
Yeah.
You don't actually.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea.
It's kind of 147.
wait, hold on.
I thought about doing it, but I was like, I'll just stick with it.
Hold on.
Yes, that's fine. One of the things that's.
Yeah, what is better?
Yeah, because for him, there are so many that's like, it's just he's open up to sharing his ideas, as if he has a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I wrote more than.
Oh, this is
Okay, I'm sharing. This is the chapter 5 review questions. Since I set them up as a quiz instead of a form, I can actually see what's going on. I've heard some chatter a little bit about some of the answers. Remember that oftentimes as a student, you guys don't get much input on things, but I'm developing these, so I'm willing to listen. However, there are certain things I'm not willing to listen to, like it should count this wrong answer as right. I won't do that. But I will take into consideration things that make common sense. So let's see what we've got here. I think we can see the questions. It's going on crazy without me. So there was a few, greater than and more than. Let's find that one. Does anyone know what number that one was?
It was number 2 or 3.
right there, 4. Is that it?
That's it, number 4. Okay. And so the reason I wanted to talk to you guys about this one was because more people answered more than greater than. Is that what the book said? Because if it said more than, then we have to make that be a correct answer, right? But think about it from a professionalism point of view. If you were explaining something to somebody in a job interview, would you sound more professional if you said greater than, or would you sound more professional if you said more than?
Definitely greater than.
Greater than is definitely the correct way to say it, because we use the greater than and the less than symbols and, just all those kinds of things. So that's why I only put greater than in there as a correct answer. But if the book says more than when it's talking about that kind of thing, then that needs to be a correct answer too. So what do you guys think about that one? It looks, this is both classes, so this just isn't just you guys. But between the two classes, we had twice as many people say more than greater than. So to me, that kind of indicates that our book says more than somewhere. I don't think it's as good of a way to describe that situation, but we've got to accept it if that's something that the textbook says. So I'll see if I can change those answers once they've been graded. I think I can. But let's see what else we've got. What was another one? I know there was another one that I was questioning when I put it in. I just can't think of which one it is. Some of these are difficult because the Excel forms won't let you make your answer be more than one line. So it's kind of hard to put some of these in with it. What's the output going to be? So be really careful with those. And again, we can adjust the correct answers if it seems necessary. So, here is the one, the condition on this one. We were talking about this one up here a little bit before. So in this question, we're referring to this pseudocode from above. Is it going to, I don't think it shows us that because I made it a section header. But in the pseudocode that this is referring to, it says until number equals 0 at the end of the loop. And then the question says, what is the test condition for this loop? So this is super picky. And it's a super picky programming thing that you'll run into in a lot of different programming classes. But what it actually wants is just the condition part, the number equals 0. When we add the word until, then we're adding in stuff that's outside of that condition, right? Because we could have the word if there, or the word while. Any of those things would work with that condition. So what are you guys' thoughts on that? If you're working in another class, like with the Cengage, do you have anything that uses Cengage like MindTap or SAM or any of those? So some of the other classes use those for programming things. So in that case, they would not accept the answer unless it just had the test condition part. So that one, I'm kind of leaning either way on that. What are you guys' thoughts?
I would like to see a question like that be written in actual Python or something, because I think the pseudocode.
It would be exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be the exact same thing. And you would still have to make that same decision. Are you gonna add the word if, or is that really part of your condition? It's not, because your condition is just that part that comes back as true or false.
Because the
Right.
until is the function, not the.
Right, that's part of the looping syntax that,
Gotcha.
that your
Sorry.
condition is testing. No, I think that's a really important point, because with that Cengage software, it can really kill people when, if that's not something that's understood. So I don't want to be picky, just want to make it to where you get the answers right. Does that make sense? Is that there? Okay, what else? What other ones do we have?
Number 20.
20, thank you.
Well, never mind.
Even now, I can't.
Do you see it?
Yeah, so I was confused. It says list one of the statements in the body of the loop. There's two statements in the body of the loop.
Oh, let me check that one, because it might not take both of them. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Let me check it.
In the very beginning, I started writing them down a little bit.
Yeah.
I know online, if you guys register your books on.
And I picked the one that wasn't right.
I know, I bet I just didn't have them both in there. That's why I need you guys' help, because sometimes it can be hard to do these. That's why I'd never had them auto answer before, because it's so difficult to say what exactly is the right answer with some of these. So we'll try it. We can get it to auto grade so that you guys can get some response back instead of waiting on me.
Random, so I was trying to look at my copy as well, but it's telling me to fill out the form again.
Did you email it?
Yeah, it doesn't show the
Oh.
test you already did. It shows
Okay.
in your one.
No, I didn't.
We got it. You can ask me.
I'm kidding.
Turn to your group, turn to your group.
I'll do the same thing if it makes you feel better.
Okay.
I'm just so glad it lets you email the answers to yourself, because it never used to do that. So here in 5 years, it'll work the way it should. Be all done with it. Okay, next thing is our Colab document. So let's go take a look at that. I hope you saw over the weekend, I sent out a message telling you that we will work on this together, because there were some questions popping up and I didn't want to. So I changed our due date to tonight, and that's what I've made our one for next week, so that we would have a chance to talk about it when we get back together. And of course, you can resubmit or update or anything that you want to do. Oops. I've got to log in with a different account. Hang on. So I'm always running behind too many accounts.
After getting through that notebook, I don't want to count beans anymore.
You don't want to count beans? Well, they had one in chapter 6 and I just left it out. I was like, these people have done this. They know how to do it.
Okay, so
Okay, let's look at it. For the chapter 5 one, I'm going to bring up the table of contents so that you guys can just point me to any place where we need to go. Now, I would assume that some of these ones down here at the end, we might need to work on together. If you guys all got them, we're awesome and we don't need to. Where did you have questions?
I thought this was something she made up, so I'm just using her. I'm not the brightest kind of book sometimes.
No questions? Everybody's got it? Everybody got it all turned in? You're all done? We don't need to look at anything?
I kind of stopped at the, I started it and I tripped up, and then after we sent the Discord, I stopped.
Where did you
I'm
stop?
at 513 right now. I'm still at 513. But if you want to start on the bottom, I haven't done any of those.
Okay.
Real quick, so,
Uh-huh.
okay, so I just figured this out, because James, I was talking to James about this. So, okay, so when it comes to pseudocode, when it says count plus plus, it means just like basically +1.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Very good.
This makes
You'll
so much
remember
sense.
that forever.
Okay, because like I was looking at that at first, and I was like, all right. So with all these, I can either do it as like it's supposed to be like the variable count, and then you add that, but then add against, which means maybe multiply that by 2. But then again, because I was thinking more like just math itself from all the math classes that I've been taking. So I was just thinking about that.
I don't, but up at the, probably up at the desk at that counter they should. The guy that sits behind that glass door, I think he has some. So yeah, really good. So it's okay to go to Google. I'm gonna try it. So like something like that, like he's talking about, if I said, what is count plus plus? What would the Google do? Oh, look, it actually tells me. And so Google has gotten so good, you guys, that you can actually put your code in to search. You couldn't used to do that, but you can now. So I can say, what is count plus plus? And I'm gonna get it. It's gonna tell me something. Now, I might not get a lot of meaning out of that description at first. I might have to do a little bit more digging to try and get to it. But definitely don't be afraid to just Google some code and see what it tells you as far as what it's doing. Because we can get so many more answers than we used to be able to for that sort of thing, which probably doesn't mean a lot to you. But
Now, whatever count plus plus is the step section of our range, we don't have to put like count plus 1. We can just put the 1, correct?
yes,
Okay,
exactly.
because it's already telling
Mhm.
count.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so for our Colab for chapter 6, I did put some comparisons in there like that for our for loop in Python compared to the pseudocode, because it is confusing. Our pseudocode is harder than our Python code is coming out to be. This pseudocode that's supposed to be English-like and help us code is worse than the Python language encode that we're using. So it is that way. If you're feeling that way, you're absolutely right. And I apologize that you have to learn both of these things, because most people that get an opportunity to learn Python just use Python for pseudocoding in their future. You know, because they've already got this language that's real easy to use, and they can kind of figure out if things are going to work by using it. So it oftentimes does get used in the place of pseudocode. So if you're feeling that way, that's actually a good thing, because that means that Python is making so much sense to you that the pseudocode is seeming hard, and I think that's good. Let's start out, though. I'm going to go past the beans. I think that that's good, and I want to go down to student activity 14. How's everybody on that one?
That's the one I'm looking at right now.
Does everybody need that? Okay, good. So in this one, let me get to it. It's not taking it to me correctly. Let me get to the right place here. Okay, so in this loop, we're asking for how many hours they worked and how much their pay is. And then we're asking if they want to process another one. So this loop, we just want to keep asking if they want to process another employee.
They didn't even have Band-Aids back there.
They didn't?
They had to give me a piece of gauze and then medical tape.
So you just have to get taped up. I'm sorry, is it going to keep you held together?
Yeah.
I'm glad it's not a big giant
It's not
injury.
a big deal if it was, you know, required to wear a mask because of the sickness everybody's getting.
So I see they're not worried about it because of that.
He's like, normally we don't keep them in the classrooms. I said, well, normally I don't wear a mask in the classroom either.
Exactly. Okay, so we have 5.25 and 5.26, and they're really similar. 5.25 is asking for the amounts, and then 5.26 is just has it switched around a little bit. Either one of these loops, we're going to have to switch around to make it in Python, because Python doesn't like a bottom-controlled loop like this. So we'll have to do things a little bit different. That's where we have to get a little bit crazy with our pseudocode. So let's try it. I don't have a code block here, so I'm going to add it. Now, if you already have this one, you can work with us, help us with it, or you could go ahead and get your copy going of the Chapter 6 Colab and start working on it ahead if you are already all comfortable with these. I'm going to call this an input loop. To prompt for input until user is done. I'm going to get a snip of this pseudocode so I don't have to keep scrolling back and forth, making you dizzy. And we can go from there. Okay, so in our example, the first thing we're going to do is set up our variables. Now, again, this is a confusing area between our pseudocode and our Python code, because in Python, we don't really have to declare variables before we use them, but we have been just to be in sync with our pseudocode, and because it's a good habit. It's just a good practice for us to get into. So for this program, we need an hours variable. We need a rate variable. It's going to be their pay rate. We need a salary variable. And we need a response. Now, our response is going to be a string, and we would like for this thing to be initialized so that the loop will execute. So I'll just go ahead and set it to Y, that yes, I would like to enter another employee. Okay, so since I have to switch things around a little bit, I'm going to put my while loop at the top, and I'll say while response equals Y. Do you guys want to allow a lowercase y also? I'll let you add that in. We'll add it in as we're working. Now, I'm going to put the code in the order that they have it in their loop in the pseudocode. But since we're using a top controlled loop and they used a bottom controlled loop, we might have to make some adjustments to the order of the code. We'll see as we get going. Now, the first thing that we're going to input is our hours. I'm going to convert our hours to an integer. And they want our prompt to say, enter the number of hours worked. Next, we want the rate of pay. So we could really say that the pay could be a float. And in this program, it doesn't matter. We could make it an integer or a float. But I want to make it a float because we haven't used a lot of float variables. Just to kind of remind everybody, we can use that cast to float just the same way as we can use the cast to an integer. So then we're going to ask for the rate of pay. As we're working, we could add some comments if we like. I'll put a comment by a response variable and say initialize to run our loop. Because if I didn't set that thing to Y, our loop wouldn't run the first time. Okay, in our code, they say that to calculate our salary, we just multiply the hours times the rate. And then we have this really long output. Print an employee who worked. And then we want to add our hours. And remember, we have to convert those to a string. At the rate of and then finally, our last print message will say receives a salary of $, and then we want to add our salary to the output. Lastly, then, we're going to ask them if they want to continue. So we're going to update our response variable by asking them for more input. And our input question is going to say, process another employee, Y or N, parenthesis. So let's try it. Go ahead and try yours whenever you're ready. See what it does. One thing I like about Colab is that I can try running it and it doesn't put the execution screen over the code. So you guys can still see it. Little details matter. It's thinking. Okay, so I finally got my prompt. Enter the number of hours worked. 10 hours. Enter the rate of pay. 50. They make a lot. Oops. So I got a little bit of output. My first print statement worked, but my second one crashed. Why is that? Got it converted to a string. What else? Is there any place else that I left that out? Salary. Good. So let's try that again. So now I got our output message, an employee who worked 10, looks like our message is missing a little bit there, huh? At the rate of 0 per hour, receives a salary of 0. Uh-huh.
Mine just doesn't do anything.
Doesn't do anything.
It's like frozen.
Starts and then just stops.
Do you have this little thingy? Can you click? Can you make it stop?
No, so I press it, it
Uh-huh.
runs half and then it just stops.
Does it give you anything?
Doesn't do anything.
Okay, hang on and we'll share it.
Your pay is supposed to be rate under hours or while responses.
Okay, hang on. I want to make sure everybody sees that. Why am I getting a 0 per hour? She's answering. So I want you guys to really see what that bug is. Can you repeat?
Pay is supposed to be rate.
I used a different variable name. Just switched it on myself, didn't I? Which one do you like better? I've actually used rate twice and pay only once. And I used rate up here. So I just randomly was talking and made it something else there, which can happen. That's the one I should change. Okay, let's have you share. Let me stop so you can share and we can see what's going on with yours. So show me, James, what it does when you run it.
Do you have another one running above it? I think that happened last week, didn't it?
Yeah.
I don't see anything. Does it let you click on the run button or does it not even let you click on it?
Yeah, it lets the run button get
It
pressed.
just doesn't
but
do anything.
Yeah.
Try to make sure you told you pretty close to where it was. I tried just, when I was doing this at home, doing something.
Uh-huh.
Probably so wrong, it just wouldn't even run it.
Wouldn't even do it.
Seriously, it was so wrong, it just wouldn't even run it. Because I went and tried other programs. It just must be so off. It wouldn't even give me an error. Well, that could be a possibility.
That's the thing. I mean, like both of us have like that exact same thing. That's how she's done it.
Yeah.
Unless maybe it's just like the runtime session. But I mean, if it's us two, could it be anyone else here that's also having it as well?
Yeah, everything looks good. Go up and run the last one you did up above it, and let's see. It'll let you run that one. It does run. Huh. Go back down to that new one. Try again.
I've tried refreshing mine, terminating the runtime session, and then reloading.
Oh, I see it.
It's still.
I see it. Can you zoom in a little bit, make it a little bigger? Control scroll. Yay. Okay, look at your very last line of code. Do you see how we open the parenthesis for the Y or N? Is that parenthesis closed anywhere? It shouldn't matter though, because you have outer parentheses around the whole thing, so I don't think that's it. I thought that was it when you were zoomed in, but I don't think it is now. It's okay.
But at least it ran it.
It did try to run it though, that's true.
Would it matter?
So yeah, it is that something is it's so angry about something. Oh, I see what it is. Is your while loop ever run? Look at that while loop, you guys, at that condition. Can we use the and word there? Can response be uppercase and lowercase? Put it back, do your control Z, because you have it right. We just need an or there instead of an and.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
So I was gonna ask everybody to put that in on your own. But James has it so right, we'll just look at it with his when he gets it back in there. So in this one, in this condition, if we want to allow an uppercase letter Y and a lowercase letter y, we need to do it just like this. And we need that or keyword, because if we use the and keyword, we're never going to get a true condition there, right? But this is exactly how we want to do it, where we're saying response equal Y or response equal Y. James, take out the response equal here for us of this second one and just leave that lowercase y and try to run it that way if you'll show everybody. So see how it acts like it's going to work. And it just is actually really unpredictable. So what'll happen is if he said it'll just end. So it does it once, but it just doesn't work right then after that. So that while condition needs to be just like James had it originally with the response equal. So if I said that enough ways to be confusing, that's perfect. Thank you, sir. So that was interesting that it did make it look like it wasn't running at all, huh? You just run into the weirdest things. Okay, does everything look good there, or is there still an error?
I still get an error.
So on your salary, put a string around it so that it converts it to a string. And then open, so do your opening parenthesis after the str. And then close your parenthesis. We need an extra closing parenthesis on line 19. There we go. Good. Let's make a couple more corrections here. Jason, can you share? James, is that you still?
Yeah.
Can you, okay, go ahead and stop sharing and we'll let Jason share.
Okay.
Find that green there, the green share screen button and stop share.
It's not even on there.
Is it not on there?
Yeah.
The Zoom thing just likes to leave you.
Force crash. Oh, there you go.
Huh? Thank you. Okay, Jason, show us what you've got. So on your while loop, we need to end with a colon. Try that and let's see if that was. And then on line 20, make sure your message that's inside the input statement is in double quotes because it's a string. Perfect. Do you see it? I don't see it. Invalid syntax. Oh, it's the print statement up above. I see how you are trying to trick us. We need another closing parenthesis on line 19. Yep, at the very end. So remember, we can always get weird leftover errors from the line above. Makes it so fun. Now see if it'll work. Oh, he's got it. Okay.
So if we were doing this for like a test or something, instead of saying string rate plus, could I just add a comma and then comma rate and then it's.
You should be able to. Some
I
of
mean,
the
I know it works.
right, some of the auto grading things, the only time they would catch something like that is like if they want you to do the \n and you have a separate print statement, it might catch that, but it shouldn't be able to catch the comma versus the plus. Yeah, and that's a fine way to do it. No problem.
Is there a big difference with it? Like I know.
It's just the comma is only a Python thing.
Okay.
It's not in other. The plus is in all, yeah, most other programming languages too. Okay, I still have some problems. I'm not happy with this thing. So let's keep testing it. Something's wrong. When I put in my hours worked, that's good, and my pay is good, but my output messages are still a little lacking. I'm seeing this an employee who worked 10. So that's from the textbook. It's just missing something. But I would like to add that. So that's line 17. I want to add hours is text after that so that it says an employee who worked 10 hours instead of just saying an employee who worked 10. And then at the rate of 50 per hour, receives a salary of 500. Okay, so I think everything else is okay in that. It was just that one about the working 10 just kind of hanging there. Now on mine, I have not added the or condition to allow a lowercase y. So I'll test it first with the uppercase y and make sure that my loop works and that it starts asking me the questions for a new employee. It is, so I'll say 5 and 45. And I should get a different rate of pay for that one. And then now I'll do my N and make sure that it ends my loop. And it should. So that one looks good. Everybody okay with it? Working all right? Okay, data validation. We've talked around it a little bit and we've looked at some code that lets us do some things. And in these examples, I just gave you the examples that were in our textbook. So I'm not asking you to do any of these right now because in chapter 6, we'll be doing a lot of these type of loops to validate our input. But I want you to make sure that you understand the difference of the different type of looping syntax. So here, our mice ordered, we're asking how many they want to order because we're doing a bottom control loop. As soon as we read in how many, we make sure that it's a positive number. If it's not, we'll just continuously ask them to enter that data until it is. So that's a post-test loop. If we were using a pre-test loop, we kind of have to double some things up. We have to first ask how many mice they want. Then in our while loop say, hey, if however many they wanted was negative, let's go into a loop and ask them to re-enter a number until they give us a positive number. So notice how this looks like it has more code. It does, right? So it's just a little bit different in the way that the code was set up. And our programming language could have an impact on that too. And then they have a sample pseudocode where they're using the int function for data validation. I gave you a chapter 4 Colab where we saw that in Python, we have to use this special code called try and except to check for an integer error like that. So we'll be doing that in another example. But that one's there for you in case you needed it. Okay, so floor and ceiling. That was the first thing people asked me about yesterday in the other class. They said, I'm confused about the floor function versus the ceiling function. Well, we have a couple of examples here, but we could try some things in a little bit different of a way. Let's go to Python. And if you remember, we haven't used idle in a long time. But if we click on idle to just open it up, I'm going to make sure that which one I'm getting. I'm not sure if I'm getting the old one or the new one. We'll see when it opens. But I can just open up that command interpreter. It's 3.11. That'll work. And I can try some things. So let's say I want to try this floor command. What does floor do if I give it a number like 3.2? First, it gripes at me, right? It's like, you can't do that. I have to import that math library. And then I can say math.floor 3.2. So if I take floor and I use a number like 3.2, it just chops off the decimal part. What if my number is bigger, like 3.8? Does that round? No, it just chops off the decimal place. So floor is almost the same as the int function. If I do int 3.2, I get back 3. So floor is kind of a function that is created just to be consistent with other programming languages. You could use the int function and it would do the same thing. Now, these examples that are in the Colab document are our textbook trying to come up with examples where you would reasonably use the floor and ceiling functions, but you honestly could live your life as a programmer for many, many years and never use the floor or ceiling functions because there are others available. So let's try some others. What about that ceiling thing? What if I do, is it ceiling? She's right, math.ceil. And how would I do that if I didn't know? Well, I could Google it, Python ceiling, and right away I see, oh, it's CEIL for Python. So I can Google it. But now I want to try that function. So if I try ceiling on 3.2, it rounds up. I mean, it's not really rounding, is it? It's going to the next higher integer and cutting off the decimal place. If I do ceiling on 3.8, it's going to give me the same thing, right? A 4. So notice how floor just truncates. Ceiling kind of add ones and truncates, right? So they do some interesting things. What about round? Round is another function. Now, if I use the round function, 3.2 gives me 3. What about 3.8? So that's the function I would use if I really wanted to round a number.
Wait, so okay, if we have the round function, why do we have the ceiling and floor function?
I don't know.
Because honestly, because whenever I was like, you know.
That was that BS I just made up about being consistent with other programming languages.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's just consistency. If you look at the examples, they try to come up with a reason for using the ceiling function. Like they're saying, oh, we're just automatically going to make their pay the next higher number. So that would work because that way they're saying, if the manager puts in $3.20, we want to make that raise go to $4.
I actually looked it up to find out why.
Yeah.
And the best answer that I saw was that it's faster.
It's faster.
Yeah.
Because it's not doing math.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It's like 0.00075 blah blah blah.
Good job. That makes sense. Faster is a good reason because we're just truncating. Okay, so those ones that one I'm going to leave for you. But we're going to do these others. Okay, so let's go down to student activity 16. This one that is adding up a number into a sum. So this one is one that we'll do kind of a standard thing. So we're going to just be summing up a list of numbers. We're not going to keep track of those numbers or anything. We're just going to be adding them to a total. So we'll say input a number and add it to a total. So if you think about it, we do this all the time in computer programming. If we're trying to figure out what a checking account balance is, their debit card balance, we're going to start with their beginning balance, and we're going to be adding and subtracting transactions from it. So it's kind of a running total. It's always changing depending on the last thing that was applied. Now for this example, we'll set up our variables. We need a variable named sum, and we need a variable named number. Before we start our loop, we're going to ask for our first number, and we want it to be an integer. So I'll cast it as an integer. In our input statement, let's say enter a positive number, enter 0 when done. Now in our while loop, our condition is just going to be that that number is greater than 0. So notice in this example, we're not doing any validation. If the user enters a negative number, it just won't execute our loop and just nothing will happen to it. Because we'll change that a little bit when we try some others. Okay, so while our number is greater than 0, let's add it to our sum. We've seen that I can say sum equals sum plus number, but there's a shortcut way that I can create that calculation. I can say sum plus equal number. And what that shortcut says is take the variable sum and add the value of number to it. So kind of like that sum plus plus or count plus plus thing. This is another shortcut. Now, we've taken that number that they gave us and we added it to the sum. So all we need to do is ask them for another number. So I'm going to copy this input statement. And when you're using Colab, make sure you do copy selection, not the whole cell. And then you can Control V to paste. So remember, Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and most important, Control Z to undo, because Control Z is the programmer's best friend. So always, now Colab doesn't like to Control Z as much, but it does it. Okay, that looks good. So that's our whole loop, those 2 lines of code. So now when we're done with our loop, let's print out a summary message, and we'll say the sum of the numbers is, and we'll add in our sum, and of course we need to convert it to a string. So let's try running it. All of these looping programs that we're doing would work great on that Python tutor website. But remember, Python tutor is a little awkward when we're having to input things. So it kind of is a little distracting, but it definitely is something worth trying. So I'm going to start this up and I should get my prompt, enter a positive number, enter 0 when done. I'll just put in a number and I can keep putting in numbers. And finally, when I don't want to add any more numbers, I'll put in 0. And then I should get my final message, the sum of the number. I should say numbers. How's that look? Is everybody's work okay? Do what?
I got error point for 0.
You got it. The sum is 0?
Yeah.
Let's see what's going on. Show us what you got.
Oh, I misspelled the word. Here we go.
You find it?
Yeah, I misspelled the word.
Oh, okay, great. This one is such a good example, you guys. I just can't even tell you how often you could refer back to this code for how many different problems you need to solve. So it's a really good one to kind of keep in the back of your mind that you have that. Not a lot of code, but good stuff.
This is just a total loop. There's no way to get out of it. If I put 0, it's still gonna ask me for a number.
No, because it shouldn't. It shouldn't. Is yours is doing a never loop, ending loop?
It's always prompting me to enter a number.
So if you put 0, it's not ending?
Yes.
Let's see what you got. Share with us, or we shall troubleshoot. Okay, so I see it. Do you guys see it?
I can't see anything on that.
It's pretty small. Control scroll. We should make everybody control scroll when you share with us.
Like with your mouse pad, right? I'll scroll on.
Ah, he communicated. Good job. So do you guys see the problem?
There needs to be a space between the greater than sign and the 0. Does that matter at all?
Yeah.
It could, but I don't think it does. So that line that's underlined, our input statement, where are we saving the data that they type in?
No variable.
There's no variable. So we need the number equal here on line 13 so that it matches number 10, line number 10.
Oh, and you switch variable names
Yeah,
a couple
yeah.
times.
Oh, I
And
see.
line number
You
10.
use
And then
numbers
10
for the,
needs to be numbered.
you use variable shape to replace every number.
Okay. Now it stops.
Now then, okay.
Good job. Very, very good. Everybody's troubleshooting. Like a bunch of ducks. Okay, this one is computing an exam average. When we write this one, I want you to be thinking about how similar it is to that previous one, because we're doing a lot of the same thing. Let me snip it. And we'll get started here. So for this one, we're gonna be prompting, instead of for a number, we're prompting for a grade. And then we're gonna add up all the grades. And at the end, we're gonna calculate an average. To calculate an average, you have to know how many you had. So we'll need to add a counter variable to keep track of how many grades they enter. Count and sum grades, then calculate an average. So we wouldn't be able to calculate our average until our loop is all done, right? Till they're done entering grades. And I've actually seen developers, programmers that are learning calculate the average every time the loop runs, and that'll actually work because in the end, they'll have the right average. But if we start thinking about time used up by the processor, then we had a bunch of calculations happen that didn't need to happen. So sometimes our code can be put in the wrong place and still work, but it can cause some performance problems. So for this one, we're going to need a count to count the grades that get entered, and we're going to need a sum to sum up the grades that get entered. We need the actual grade that they type in. And then finally, we're going to need the average. In looking at this, they want us to be thinking about whether we want integers or floats. So I'm going to put 0.0 for all of the ones that we're going to treat as float data types. We'll tell Python, we think we might need decimal places with these.
That's how you make an actual float as well.
Yeah, sort of. Python's like, yeah, I'm going to do whatever I want anyways, but you can try. Okay, so we've initialized everything with 0, so we're good. Their input prompt is a little weird. Sorry, it got me sidetracked there. It's like, what? So we're going to ask for a grade. Now our grade we decided is going to be a float data type. And so in our input prompt, we're going to say enter an exam grade, enter 0 when done. Now we can go into our while loop while grade is greater than 0. So we're going to use that grade variable to control our loop. First thing we need to do is add to our count. We were talking about that plus plus operator. Let's see if he works in Python. We'll just try to add one that way. Then for our sum, we want to add in this new grade. So I can use the plus equal operator and say, just take the sum you currently have and add this new grade into it. And then I'm ready to prompt for input again. So my next new grade should be a float from the input command, enter an exam grade, enter 0 when done. I'm going to put another comment here and the loop. Let's do a like that. So we remind ourselves that we went back to column 1. I think you guys have it. But we'll print out, oops, I'm not ready to print yet. I need to calculate that average. So now that my loop is done, I know that I have all of the grades that they wanted to type in, so I can use my sum grades variable, and I can divide by my count grades variable. That should give me my average. Then I just need to print that out. My exam average. Go up to the top there. Make sure you can see everything. So this one, if you notice, is almost exactly the same as that previous one, except that we had to add in this counter because we needed to keep track of how many got entered. And then we were able to use that to calculate our average. So go ahead and try running it when you're ready. Doesn't like that, huh? So the best we can do with Python is plus equal 1. It doesn't like to plus for us. So I'm glad you guys mentioned that in the textbook, because again, that's another area where we see this just differences. Enter an exam grade. 50, 50, 60. And I'll put in a 0 to finish. That looks pretty close. What you got?
So how would you just have about 2 decimal places?
How would you have 2 decimal places? You guys did all that Code Academy stuff where they taught you that. How would you do it? I've never done that Code Academy stuff. You guys will have to teach me. Go to Google, let's figure it out.
I forgot.
Show me how, let's Google it. I did that Code Academy stuff and said, no, I don't care. I don't have to learn it, I'm not a student.
Oh, you're good at that?
Huh?
I found a way to do that. It's kind of like we did the round.
What did you do?
You do round, and then after the number, you actually put the number you want to round it. So I have an example I can pull up. I used it in my supermarket Python.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Cool, you find it.
Is there ASCII codes too or something?
There's some codes, and that's what we really need to do. So what I could Google is Python output formatting, right? Because that's the thing that I'm wanting to do. And then I'm going to look through all of these results and find one that I think I've used before. Let's see what I can find. There's so many new Python training sites. I always like Tutorials Point. They have really good C# training stuff too.
I found what I used.
Did you?
Yes.
What was it?
So before, can I show you?
Uh-huh. Yeah, let me stop. All right, show us.
You see down on the total price here, these round total price, and that 2 right there is your decimal point.
Oh, beautiful. That's exactly what we need, isn't it?
That brought up a huge topic for me. When they're processing money,
Mm-hmm.
okay, in a program, there's got to be a little bit of money.
Mm-hmm.
Is somebody mining that money?
Mm-hmm.
I thought so. Yeah. Okay.
That company is, but no, you're absolutely right. And if you watch the old hacker movies, early hacker movies, that's what the hackers were always doing, was stealing that round
They'd take like
error.
a quarter off of every Verizon bill, or add a quarter to every Verizon bill, and then 50 million customers. There you go.
Yeah.
Is that
movie Office Space was about?
Yes.
Yes,
exactly.
it is, exactly, isn't that how he was doing so well? Yeah, that is perfect. So you guys can do that one. I like that example. I think that's a really good example. But what if we can't round because of that little error issue? We could have some trouble. So this output formatting that they showed us how to do in Code Academy is really important. And it's pretty ugly, and we try to stay away from it. But we really need to use it. So we use percent signs. And this one right here, let's look at the total students. We've said, I want something here. The percent sign is a placeholder. It's saying right here where this percent sign is, I want you to replace this percent sign with the value of a variable. Replace my placeholder. Then whatever you replace that with, I want to show 3 decimal places. That's what the 3D is. And then the boys part doesn't mean anything. That's just what we want to print out. But then we run into another percent sign, another placeholder. And this one says, I want 2D or 2 decimal or whatever that means. Now, still within our print statement, after the double quotes have closed, we put a percent sign with a list of the values that we want to use to replace those percent signs. So let's try it. It's kind of ugly, isn't it? We can handle it though. So I'm going to say, here we have our exam average. And what I have to do here is not necessarily convert it to a string anymore, because I'm going to use this output formatting. So I want to get rid of that cast to a string. And instead, right here, I'm going to put the percent sign and D2. Oh, I've got to have that within my double quotes. It's kind of messy. Now, let's see if I've got that right. I'm going to have to pull this off to the side to check. So I'm saying, here's my whole string. The exam average is placeholder with 2 decimal places. Then I close my string. After closing my string, I put the percent sign and within parentheses, the variable that I want to use for the placeholder. So whatever the value of exam average is, I want it to show up where that percent sign is. Let's see if that works. I just got a number that was 2 digits long. So I need to find a different code.
I did it the way that I did it. I put it in the string area. I could actually share it with you if you want to see.
Let's see it. Yeah.
Okay.
There's so many ways to do it, and they're all correct. Oh, can you zoom in a little bit, Amanda? So hold your control key and scroll.
Oh, yeah. Right here. Can you see that?
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so it's percentage dot 2, because the 2 represents the amount of decimals you're using, and I think that means what?
Perfect.
And then
With 2
tag
decimal
it.
places.
Yeah, and then it's like you're tagging it with the percentage of the 2 decimals to the exam average.
So that's a great syntax. Notice how that's super close. So as you're fiddling with this, there's lots of different ways you can do it and get it to work. They're all just a little bit, less than ideal, less than perfect. Let me do that with mine. So if I change mine to say percent, can I do F2 there?
It's dot 2F.
Yeah, I don't know with this format. Oh, what's that at me? 2F. See if that'll, I don't know if that'll work with this formatting that I'm doing. We'll try it. It did. So a little bit different even still yet than what Amanda had, but the same kind of modifier. So what we have here, because this is real standard in a lot of programming languages, the percent sign is the placeholder. Right here, this tells the print statement, I'm going to do some replacement. I'm going to replace this percent sign with something else. Then after the placeholder, we have our formatting character. Our formatting character in this one says a 2 decimal place float. That's what the 2F means. After our string is completed, the percent sign tells Python, here are your replacement values. My replacement values could either be numbers, like in that example we were looking at, or variables. And I think that the way Amanda was formatted is easier to understand. I like that one better. So lots of different ways that we can do it. And like I said, they're all correct. But yeah, sometimes if you're trying to figure out how to get those last little details, get that formatting in, it can really be a bear, and it is really important. So it can cause us trouble. So, and if everybody's working okay to some point, that's what we want. But our online people, you guys all okay? All right. Now let me scroll. Where am I? Nope, that was our very last one.
So is there a possibility we could do 5.7?
To do what?
5.7.
Is it in your book?
Yeah, I was having issues with Raptor. I use Raptor.
Which one are you looking
One
at?
of the flowcharts. That's very bad.
What's the number?
5.7.
Oh,
Student activity 4.
I see what you're saying. We're gonna run out of time, so let's get together after class and look at that one, if that's all right. So I want to get on to our next Colab thing, or else we're gonna run out of time. So let's do that. This one I'm gonna close. So we have a lot of great content in here. You guys realize I am not going to look at every single one of these student activities and grade like a machine, because I am not. So I will be checking and making sure that you've gotten things done, but it won't be like I'm an auto grader. Because I want these to be learning things for you. So let's look at the week 10 Colab one. For you to find the link, it's going to be in Canvas. Let me find our class.
This is gonna be week 10, Colab, or week 10 assignment, book, chapter 6.
So yeah, week 10. Yep, that's the one. Chapter 6. And click on that link to open that Colab notebook. This one is much smaller. Don't worry. Chapter 5 was huge. Let's save this. So do File, save a copy in Drive. Bless you.
Thank you.
Now, before we start on this one, let's look at what other stuff we have for this week. So we do have a few things. Take a look with me at the Padlet code snippets, if you would. These are code snippets of loops. So what I like to do in class, they have the giant Post-it notes, and I put them around the room, and I have the code snippets on each one of those, and I have you guys go around and write down what the output would be from each of them. Well, it's COVID time, not Colab, COVID. And so I can't have you guys up moving around, touching all these papers and stuff together. So we're going to do it on Padlet instead. So this is a group project. I want you to get with your group, we won't have time in class. It'll be an outside of class thing. So you can have one group member run through it. You guys can compare notes, or you can get together, or however you want to do it. But you're going to look at the code, and then you're going to add a comment for your group as to what the output from that code would be. So it's a loop. So I want you to try to desk check it. Try to figure out what it would be without running it. Next week, we'll go through them all real fast so that everybody can see how they did on what the output would be. So remember, I don't want you to just go to Python and type it in and run it. I want you to really think about what the output's going to be. So being wrong is better than not learning anything from it, because you just copied and pasted, right? So make sure you're looking at it. So that's a group assignment. When your group is done entering stuff, I think Canvas is done with it. I don't think you have to submit anything. So there is that one, and it is due. We'll check.
Oh, yeah. You do the first one just to see what you want.
Do what?
You do the first one as a class just to see, make sure we're all on the same page.
Oh, no, you guys can figure it out. The first one is one that is good. I'm not going to give you the answer to it. Okay, the next thing is there is a Week 10 lab begin a quest. We'll have time to work on that next Tuesday, but I do want you to look at it. It is a group thing. So my plan would be Tuesday that you guys have the majority of the day to work on things, because we'll have this Colab document due and this quest due. So next Tuesday, we should hopefully be able to have almost our whole 2 hours just as lab time for you guys to work on these things. So I wanted to show them to you because I don't want you to stress about them now. And as a matter of fact, I think I'll make the Padlet due date next Tuesday also, so that you guys, we can just kind of have all of them. So the problem is, I don't want you to not do anything and wait until Tuesday, because you won't have time in class to do all of those things. So kind of decide with your group which things you want to do in class. The review questions you should do on your own. They should be like the chapter 5 ones. So again, let me know if you see any errors, problems, areas where it wasn't allowing the correct answer. Let me fix the due date on the code snippets right now. Lots to do. You guys only being here once a week sure makes it hard. The next semester, I think I have to teach a 8-week CIS120 class. What do you think about that? Reminds people, we do not do half as much. We do it twice as fast. I don't know why people think an 8-week class is going to be half as much. You still have to know it all. You just have half the time to do it in. Okay, so let's look at our Colab document. Because this one has some stuff that you can't go any further with unless we do it together. Or at least it's easier for you if we do it together. So that's why I wanted to jump ahead to it. Okay, first of all, this very first one, we've got a loop that we want to exit when a person is out of money. So this is an interesting one. In this example, we're asking the user before they start shopping how much money they want to spend. Every time they buy something, we're adding what they spent to their total. And if they get to a point where they're going to exceed how much they said they want to spend, their limit, we're going to kick them out, basically, of the store and say you exceeded your limit. So in this example, we're going to be checking our total as we accumulate it to decide if it's gone over a certain amount. And then if it has, we're going to exit our loop unceremoniously. So let's see if we can get this one going. Beep it. Now, in chapter 6, they did a lot better than chapter 5 about including flowcharts. So like you guys are noticing, our Python code is almost more understandable than the pseudocode, but flowcharts give us a nice picture of things. I really would prefer looking at flowcharts sometimes myself with entry-level people. So you can look at the flowchart, and in our flowchart here, you can see again the variables we need to start with, the prompt for our user, how much is their maximum. Then we are going to start a count, and for each time of our inner loop, we're going to ask how much the item cost, add it to our total, and check our total against our maximum. If they can still buy, we'll let them buy another one. But if they can't, we'll tell them they've reached their limit and they can't buy anything else. So let's do our code here. I'll call it purchase limit. So we'll accumulate a total and check new items against our limit. Now, when you guys are struggling with these Colab documents at home and you're researching, don't ever feel like you should have just waited until we went over it together, because you will never, ever, ever learn as much from us going over it together as you will from you struggling, trying to find the information, trying to figure it out on your own. It's really weird how our brains work. You know, it's almost like that old story about spanking kids. Some people feel like babies respond to like physical reaction. So if they don't feel something, they don't know that they shouldn't touch it. You know, that's kind of a thing. I don't know if it's true or not. Programmers are that way. Our brain only remembers something that's important to us. And if somebody just shows you how to do it and it's easy peasy, you just type along with them, your brain isn't going to remember it. But if you are at home Googling, trying to figure it out, and then we do it together, then your brain is going to remember what we did. So don't ever feel like that work at home was wasted. Oh, I should have just waited until we got here and did it together. No, you're doing the exact right thing by trying to figure it out on your own. Let's set up our variables. So we have a cost here, and we're probably going to want to float. Now we're going to keep track of a total of all of the items bought. We might want to put a comment on these variables because we are going to have a few. Total of all items so far. And our cost is going to be the cost of one item, because sometimes these variable names can get mixed up a little bit. Max is going to be the maximum, or our spending limit. And then finally, we're going to have a count. And it's just going to be an integer. And we're going to count how many items. We are going to add a second limit to this shopper. They can only have 10. So that's kind of another limit they have to deal with. This would be like a great challenge to me. You have $2,000 you can spend on 10 items or less. Go. All righty. I'll do it. Okay, so to get started, before we can really do anything, we've got to find out what that maximum is. So let's set up an input statement to ask for our maximum, our spending limit. So our spending limit was our max variable, and we said that was going to be a float. Our input prompt will say, enter the maximum amount you want to spend. And then we can put a $sign if we want. We could do some fancy formatting. Now that we've got our max limit, our pseudocode actually uses a for loop. And they do that because we say that we're only going to let them buy 10 things. And that's kind of a programming rule. They say if you know how many things or how many times you're going to execute a loop, a for loop does a really good job. So we're going to set up our for loop to run 10 times. So for, and they want us to use our count variable. And we've seen that for Python, the keywords we have to use are in range. And we're going to say, while the count is in the range of 1 to 11, because we know it always stops executing when it hits that limit, we're ready to do our loop. Okay, so for each time that we run our loop, let's ask them for the cost of this item. Enter the cost of an item. Now we need to add that to our total, plus equal cost. And here's where, with this program, we're going to get a little unusual, because if our total is greater than that maximum, our spending limit, we've reached our spending limit. Out of money. So in that case, and notice how putting that comment in there messes up the indenting. So I can print out a message. Print, you have reached your spending limit. And do make sure you're indenting if you put that comment over to the side like I did, because it did not properly indent us. And then I'll print another message. You cannot buy this item or anything else. It's kind of mean. Kind of like your credit card won't work. Now, in this example, they want us to subtract back out that cost because we're rejecting it. So to subtract it, we could do minus equal cost as a shortcut. Because we didn't let them spend it, so we got to take it back out of the total. Now, what we have to do at this point is get out of our loop. We need to exit the loop because we're not going to allow them to buy any more things. They've exceeded their limit. So we're going to use this command break. And what break does is says break out of the loop and continue executing at the line of code after the loop ends. Now, break alters the flow of control. It's not something to be used lightly. In this situation, we're using it because we've hit this condition down inside this if statement that causes us want to break out of this loop. We cannot add that condition to our for loop because the for loop doesn't let us add additional conditions, right? If this were a while loop, we could say while count less than 11 and total less than max. So a while loop would have given us more flexibility in this program. But they didn't want us to do that because they wanted us to see sometimes you get in a situation where the only thing you can do is break out of the loop. Now, just like in this case, that's probably indicating a logical situation that we could have done a little differently. We could have handled it a little better. But it'll work. It'll break us out. It's something that is available syntax. So we're going to use that and break out of our loop. Now, we need to have some follow-up messages. In our for loop, I want to print out a message. You have bought count items. So this message is only going to print out if we don't do this stuff in our if statement, right? If we execute our if statement body, we'll break out of the loop. Nothing else will happen inside of our loop. But if we don't, if our total is less than our max, we'll continue executing in our loop and we'll print out this message. You have bought this many items. Now, when we're all done, we can backspace back to column 1, and when our for loop is all done, we can print out a final message. Your total cost is, and then our total. So notice how this first print statement is inside the for loop. The second one is outside the for loop. And that's all just because of their indenting level. Begin?
Just have a quick question, and I think it's something I'm confused with. So we're supposed to make sure that this only runs 10 times, but we don't have like a count plus equals 1 or anything like that. Do we have to add that in there?
No, because the default is 1. But we could, if we wanted to put it in there, we could just put the comma 1 up here to say that it adds 1 each time.
Oh yeah, because the range every time it automatically adds.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
You put a 5 in there.
Uh-huh.
That one I'm sorry.
You got it. So I'll take it back out, but yeah, we could sure put it in. And sometimes it's clearer with that. But I like to leave it out so that you remember it's missing. Good job. Okay, let's try it. We've got a double loop here, and we have an if statement nested within our for loop. Mine's thinking, enter the maximum amount you want to spend. I'll spend $1,000. What is the cost of an item? Okay, 500. And let's see, I should have gotten that message out that says you have bought 1 item. Enter the cost of an item, 500 again. Now at this point, because we have a greater than in our if statement, that's not going to kick me out. That's going to put me at the limit, but it's going to allow me to continue shopping. Now, as soon as I put in any more, though, I'm going to be out of luck. So I'll try $10. And it says, oh, you've reached your limit. You can't buy this item or anything else. You've already spent $1,000. Now, if I want to try it again to check.
I'm gonna move to where like my max is 10, the item's 10.
Do what?
I said I'm in a loop where the max is 10 and I'm putting the item cost is 10. They're still printing out saying Well, you can't buy it because it's $10, even up the max.
Oh, let's see it.
I'm trying to figure out how to,
Let me stop sharing. Okay, let's see yours.
I don't know how to do this.
Are you on the Zoom session?
Probably not.
Then you need to get on the Zoom session.
How do you do that in modules? Is it in modules? Or
Syllabus, that's a link to it.
Yeah, or on just that home page. Down at the very bottom of that home page, it should have it. Yeah, right here at the very bottom.
there's a file for
Did I let you in?
Is it an application on the computer? Where's Zoom? On the desktop.
You can,
I was just looking at the applications. Oh, yeah, and it's not my desktop either.
you signed into the campus.
Yeah, you'll have to download it if you've never used it before.
So the notebooks that you were making on Colab,
Mhm.
do you like this setup better for you? Because I like this a lot, like doing through all these notebooks.
No, for me, I feel like you guys are doing better as a
Okay.
class. So it doesn't really matter whether I like to grade them or not. I feel like it's keeping all of your stuff together for you and letting you go through and look at samples. And so I apologize that your grades are behind, but they will continue to be so because I have to keep creating these things.
Oh, no.
Because I think we're benefiting from them. I really
Yeah.
do. So you guys keep letting me know if you think that. Because on Sunday night when I'm yelling at my husband that I need a day off, I'm starting to think they're not that great. So. I'd like a day off. It's been like since August, you know.
You need a student assistant.
I do. I need a student assistant really bad. Dr. Ford is actually messaging us about that. I guess she may have heard rumblings back this week. I may not be the only instructor that's gone psycho on the class this week. You guys are lucky. But you just get to a point where you're like,
What's it pay?
what?
The teacher's
The
assistant job.
staff's the problem. It only pays an experience.
Oh, no, I'm 36 years old.
I know most of you guys see that school Monday. Yeah.
Well,
So I have a question with this. So I went through and I was trying to spend under my limit. So I only bought 4 items and then it kept making me.
Yeah,
zero.
well, because we've got that floor loop.
So there's no way. to
Right,
have-
because it's making us do 10 things, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's kind of restricting. So there's a couple of reasons in this one, a while loop might have been more like helpful for us,
So
really.
like why?
Yeah, so
While, yeah.
really, I want you to see that that's a logic problem. A while loop would have worked so much better for this program. And sometimes they're going to give you code like this that's bad so that you can see how it doesn't work as well as some of the other things you've seen already. Because you guys are right, a while loop would work better. Because this for loop is forcing us to do it 10 times, and we can't get out of it if our maximum gets exceeded, because we don't have that ability to test that situation with our for loop. So it is kind of too restrictive for us. Are you in the Zoom?
No, it's making me register and all that fun stuff.
Oh, you should be able to just use your OTC account.
Yeah, so it's activate account. Are you signing up to go out to school? I am.
Because your OTC account shouldn't make you activate.
No, it is. Shouldn't, but it should. We should have Band-Aids.
So let's run it and make sure you guys all understand what we're talking about up here in the front. Since this is a for loop, we have to do it 10 times. So even if we exceed our spending limit on our second item, it's going to still ask us well, if we don't quite exceed it, I guess, we don't have an option to get out of it. We just have to keep doing this until 10 times are up. So all of these things are kind of bad. So I want to fix the problems with that, but I really want to get this next one done so that you guys will have it to move forward. So let's go ahead and jump, and when we get those Zoom problems fixed, we might have time. Now, the reason I wanted to look at this one is because, again, this is an area where Python does things very different than some of our other programming languages. In this example, we want to verify that the user types in a valid integer. And if they don't give us a valid integer, we want to tell them it's not a valid integer. But if they do give us a valid one, we want to add it to our sum. So it's just like the one we did previously, except that we're going to add in some checking, some editing to make sure that that number is really a valid integer. So let's see if we could do that. The flow chart is here. And I'm going to start my code. And this one will be example 6.2 valid integer. And you guys remember, if you go over to the tutoring center, they're not going to know about these Colab notebooks. And sometimes the tutors will get really distracted by something like that. So you just say, oh, my teacher said, don't worry about this notebook. Just focus on the Python code for me, because they can help you with the Python code. You could switch to idle if you wanted to work with the tutoring center. Just don't let our Colab notebooks be a problem in that area, because they're not going to be familiar with them. That's okay. You guys are doing cool stuff that they haven't seen yet. We're going to validate input as an integer. So for the variables that we need, again, you get kind of used to them. We need a count, and we need a sum, and we need a number. Now our number is going to be an integer. And if you look really close at this pseudocode from our textbook, you'll see that they say this number is a float, and then have this whole program about validating it as an integer. So even the textbook publishers can make mistakes. But we want to start out, in this one, we're going to use a for loop. So in our other example of prompting for a number and adding it to a sum, we used a while loop. Okay? Okay, so we want our variable to be count, and we want it to start at 1 and end at 10. And for each one, we want to prompt them for a number. So we'll say something like enter an integer. Now, if you notice, I didn't cast this as an int, because we're going to do that separately to validate that it's an integer. So I'm going to do it within this statement called try. So I'm going to put try colon, and then I'm going to say set number equal to an integer of number. Now, if number is not an integer, that statement's going to fail. It will not work. We're going to get an exception. So if we get an exception, we want to print out these messages. Your number, your entry is not an integer. One more message. The summation has ended. Now in our try area, if the number does pass and we can make it an integer, let's go ahead and add it to our sum. We know it's a good number. We can add it to our sum. And then the only thing that we need is to end all of these things. So I'm going to end my try except clause. I'm going to end my for loop. So I'm back in column 1, and I'm going to print out the sum of your numbers is, and our sum. Now we're right at our time to go. So let's test this one real fast. This is the one that was super important for us to get to today. So I'm going to run it. Oh, I always do that, sorry. I put my condition in parentheses because you have to in C#, but you don't have to in Python. So let me take it out. Ah, better. Okay, so now I'm prompting for my first integer. So I'll put in 5. It took it. Says enter another integer. Now, if I type in something that's not numeric, I should get that message that says it's not an integer. That's right, it's not an integer. Your summation has ended. Now, if I enter another integer, I should just continue on. And I'm going to have to keep entering numbers or bad things until I get to that 10 things, because again, we have it controlled by a for loop. Finally, it ended. Now, as you can see, every time we've typed in something that wasn't a number, it just ignored it. But every time we typed in a number, it added it up into our total. So if you got 0, we only have the 2 variables we need to check to make sure we're getting our number and our sum.
So the 4 is, it's only really useful unless you know exactly how many inputs there's going to be.
Or if you have a variable that is set to the number you want to use. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So it's usually something that's more dynamic than this.
Gotcha.
Right? So you can tell it's kind of clumsy to use for an input loop.
Okay.
We would usually, but they just are trying to come up with examples for you on it.
So, okay.
Okay, so that was 6.2. If you look at this Colab notebook, there isn't much else. There's a few activities, but nothing like that last one. So you have your Padlet stuff to work on before next Tuesday, your review questions for chapter 6, the Colab notebook. Shoot, that should be enough. I think that should keep you busy. I don't want you to be bored or anything. So don't worry about the Quest one, because we'll do that in class.
I wanted to do it.
You guys are the first group to do this hybrid format. You're doing just a great job. It is stressful for us to only meet once a week, but I think everybody's doing really, really well with it. So, meet with me privately if you want me to move forward saying it's bad, because otherwise you guys are giving me all the ammo to say, no, it's actually working out pretty good. They're doing really good with it. I like it. Sometimes I feel like I'm loading you up with
More
stuff.
classes.
More classes. Yeah, so get out of here. I'll see you next week.
Just right.
Uh-huh.
Sort of, yeah. So,
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah. Well, we could before too.
Oh, wait,
Already first.
Oh, we were both wrong. So we would first be 4, 4.
50.
So we should go 4, 6, and then 8.
Uh-huh.
And then 1, 2, 3, 9,
Right. That's exactly what you wanted. You guys got it.
Thank you.
I was like, no, I'm not gonna do it for you.
No, I wanted to make sure that that's how we started.
Yeah.
We would put 4.
Yeah, and remember, you guys are the only ones who decide when you got it, right or not. So it's not a big deal if you have something typed a little different, it's just for you to know, we did figure it out, run out, yeah.
We're
Yeah.
seeing this, we need to know.
Yeah.
These are really like logical places.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So we're not gonna, I'm not gonna grade it, say, oh, no, there was not a space here, it's just so that you know you were able to figure it out. Cause there's some ugly groups, I try to find really ugly ones. You too.
And it can, it'll just keep, that's even that or something. Because I'm adding plus.
Get rid of it.
So, I guess, send me a message if you wanna look at it.
Yeah, and that's what they do, is get the greater
I
than.
should get it.
So good job, that
I set it up to
detail,
where I
really
get
get ya.
notification.
I know.
Right, you get it.
I did that first one to work, but that was lucky. Great.
She's getting off this stuff, then once you figure it out, I think what you got.
It's
So
smart, but,
like,
edit
I
for
shouldn't
me,
even be
literally, like, I mean,
like using this as an
No,
example
that's
because
fine.
like
I'm watching.
I'm
like,
using yes as the
This is a different one.
Right.
Raptor is
Anytime.
using no as the yes.
I mean, I'll
So
hopefully my
basically,
daughter's a
the
little
fact
serious.
is that, I think that's how
My
it
combo
is,
sucks.
5, 6.
Take it easy, man.
So yeah, so 5, 6, I didn't. I don't think I did that.
Well, and it depends on how they have it in the pseudocode. Sometimes it'll work with that
Yeah.
without you doing
So-
anything.
So it's telling you to do number greater than 0. It wouldn't work because it wouldn't do this part right.
Okay,
So basically I had to make it a no. So number is not
Mhm.
equal to 0.
very good, right.
So do I have to do that basically
Mhm.
here too?
Mhm. So could you say count, just change from less than or equal to greater than? That would, so
Okay,
get
yeah,
rid of
yeah,
your
yeah.
equal completely.
So it would need to be.
So,
I'm gonna be struggling with that whenever I get home.
yeah, but whenever you're working with Raptor, just noticing that you have to switch that is
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people won't even notice it, they'll just be like, that won't work.
Yeah, that's why I got stuck last Tuesday
Uh-huh.
because it wouldn't run it, and then this last weekend. I was
So
like, I need to
this-
switch it.
Does that one need to go up into your loop?
I feel like that's what it would have to
Yes.
be.
So let's drag those.
try to put it in right where it says
No.
yeah. So.
All right.
So now it's just continuing to run until it gets to 25.
So that looks good. Yay!
I knew it.
So yeah, just even noticing
noticing
that that's totally what the big deal is with it.
I just wanted to make sure before I even attempted to do that, make sure that I had it flipped
Perfect.
before you were doing that.
That looks good.
Awesome.
I just got out of B block of this class. We just finished chapter 1, so I'm like looking at chapter 5, I'm like, this must be the 16th.
How are you doing with it?
Pretty good. I will say that my first round of all my classes, it was learning time, but now I pretty much got it.
Uh-huh.
So, because like I told you, one thing I'm not used to is 2-hour sessions.
You had to kill her.
So, yeah, so I'm trying to balance that, which I like that there is quality time for students to learn. I'm just used to 50 minutes and 75 minutes.
Yeah, I was too.
So, yeah.
It was just never, and I spent like, I guess 15 years being able to go to the restroom at 9:20. And I swear the first 3 years I was here, it would be getting to 9:20 and I'd be like, "Is it time? No, it's 9:50 here. No, it's 9:20. I have to go to the restroom. It must be 9:20. I swear there were times I let everybody out early. I was just like,
Yeah,
it's gotta be
I've
9:20.
done where I've been, it's like 9:30, I'm like, y'all can go. Because my lesson is done, and then I don't have any high school students, and then, in whatever, one class, and so I'm just like.
They're a nice group, aren't they? The high school kids? I
Yeah, they
really like them.
are, they are.
They're just working so hard and
Yeah, they are.
they just seem to be doing a really good job and they love Python.
Yeah, I like this one.
Do what?
My room is cool too, like, you want to trade room?
No, I can't. That room makes me throw up.